Well, this morning we'll go straight to the papers because we have with us here someone who will be taking a look at the papers with us. Richard Mammah is Managing Director and Editor-in-Chief, The Difference, and former editor, Business Hallmark. He joins us here in the studio. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
You know, anyway, let's just go to the papers because sometimes perhaps give our viewers an inkling with so many stories to deal with in 30 seconds. How easy or difficult is it for an editor to pick a major story? Okay. Or a major headline?
Yeah, no, it's not an easy call, but then I think the major determinant is the readership. Okay. You know, what would the readership want? What would gel with the readers, you know, in that sense?
Just to use the word, what will sell.
What will sell.
Okay, lead story this morning. Let's begin with the Daily Trust newspaper, and it leads with that all-important, some would say controversial story. Doubts over Buhari's fresh $800 million loan request. And look at the riders to that story. Nigeria fast exceeding borrowing limit. That's from the budget office. Total debts hit 77 trillion naira. New requests a parting gift. That's according to the CDD. No justification to incur debt for incoming government. That's a quote. You may want to find out who said that. And use savings for subsidy removal to fund palliatives. That's according to Muda Yusuf. What do you make of all of this?
Yeah, I think it underscores the fact that we have not gotten it right, you know, because governance is expected to be a continuum. So if a government is outgoing, it has to be very considerate. In fact, from the moment the election timetable comes out, which was done about a year ago, if not more, right? That government, the outgoing government, ought to appreciate the fact that, hey, I should be winding down. You know, it's like a truck, you know, on the express. You don't, the driver does not press his brakes when he gets to where he wants to stop. If he does, road safety and everybody will be screaming. So it's the point. 1 year ago, this government was supposed to begin the winding down process, not to start fresh governing. You know, that's what it is.
As far back as 1 year ago.
As far back as 1 year ago, because it was clear you were outgoing. You were making the sound bites. I am outgoing. I'm preparing to go. The elections will be free, fair, credible, XY. But you know, the accelerated pace of activities says, what have you been doing with 7 years? So by the time you now start getting all these requests coming at this final moment, what it says to us is that, look, you are not getting the picture that it's a continuum. Nobody wants to say, oh, this is what you have not done, this is what you must do at the final analysis. But the point is that you must begin to wind down.
But is there something that we're not getting here, sir? You know, because this is not the first time we're hearing about the $800 million loan request. We've heard about it from the Minister of Finance prior to this time. And it's the same government, you know, that we're handing over to the same political party. So is there something, is there a message embedded in what is being done by the outgoing administration?
Yes, there is. No, it also speaks to the fact that you have an outgoing administration that is exerting itself, over-exerting itself in relation to both its party and the nation, right? Now, so the administration is like, we are in our own microcosm. You know, we are running things, you know, the way we want to run it till the end, no dull moment. But the truth about it is that it's a team. No team scores and wins except it plays together. And Nigeria is a team, and the party is a team.
Okay, that's a Daily Trust newspaper this morning.
Well, we hope that, you know, the team has the interest of Nigerians at heart, collectively.
That's the challenge.
Not just the party. Let's go to Daily Independent newspaper. And speaking of what sells to the editor, looks like, you know, they think differently this morning. So this is Daily Independent newspaper for you. The big story is captioned this way: 10th Reps Principal Officers tussle. Wasi. Aspirants ranking reps reject APC endorsements. Take a look at the riders. accused Gbajabiamila of misleading Tinubu, one party over repeat of Saraki, Tambuwa coups. Akeredolu condemns party's NAS leadership zoning formula. You find all of the details on page 29. But let's process this with our guest this morning. There's been a whole lot of horse trading, a whole lot of alignments, which is typical, with every election cycle for Nigeria's National Assembly. But perhaps what seems to be different this time is the strong expression from the aspirants. I think we saw them, reject the party's proposal yesterday at the party's headquarters in Abuja. How much of altruism, the interest of Nigerians, do you see in the action of the aspirants? Or is this, just about themselves alone?
No, I don't think it's just about themselves. I think this is trouble that should not have come. It is trouble that should not have come because the National Assembly is elected to serve its own function within the entire remit of governance. Now, by the time you have lawmakers that have been elected, as it were, declared by INEC, these are going to be the lawmakers that would be inaugurated and become the lawmakers for the Federation. Now, that is where everybody else, gives them a break. Because their constituents have voted for them to go represent them. Now, this is not even discussing the issues of the constituents. Now, the next thing is that the party with the majority of seats, at least the single dominant majority of seats, wants to have its way in terms of how the governance process, how that tier of government supports the executive in rendering governance. But what goes on as we see it is that you do have to deal with the issues of what would the Nigerian people get at the end of the day. Because ultimately, this is all about the Nigerian people. And these elite squabbles, as it is, do not touch on the Nigerian people in the primary sense. But in a secondary sense, it also does. Because by the time the party starts coming out and saying, we have consulted, and these are your leaders, what the party is saying to us is that the party is bigger than the Nigerian constitution that said, let the members choose from amongst themselves. And it's dangerous, whether it is the executive that is doing it or whether it is the party that is doing it. No, these are things that are normally done in a democratic process, but they are done nicodemously. You don't call a press conference to say these are the people we have endorsed. No. That's the point. But
how much of this character of vociferous expression are we going to see in the character of the 10th Assembly?
I think the 10th Assembly is going to be interesting. The first bite from the electoral process was that you did not get an absolute majority for the ruling party. In the ruling party in terms of the executive. You don't have an absolute majority. So you have a diffused, legislative, chamber. Now, if the other parties are able to maintain rank, what it means then is that you are going to have more vigorous disputations over the issues of state.
But do you see that happening? Don't answer that question.
Don't.
Mr. Mammah, and continue to look at the papers. We're looking at the New Telegraph and that story about the approval for loans. Buhari seeks Senate's approval for additional $800 million loan. But see why I thought we should bring that up. To fund the 5,000 naira monthly transfers to 10.2 million vulnerable Nigerians for 6 months. Mr. Mammah, what do you think? I know you've talked about this. You've said it's not good, but consider the fact that some 10.2 million vulnerable Nigerians are going to be assured some benefits for the next 6 months. Isn't that good enough for this kind of request?
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because they say you don't shut the stables after the horses have bolted. This administration has had 8 years to work comprehensively at the nation's economic structure. It's okay to give palliatives to people, for some time and at some point. For example, when children are born, parents take responsibility for raising them up to when they become adults, perhaps maybe until they get a first degree or thereabout. But it is not responsible, it is not structural to continue to throw palliatives in a continuous sense, particularly when you are also facing issues of economic lack. So I think the most structural thing to have done over the past 7-8 years would have been to build a more proper economy. And there is nothing in the books that says we could not have built a better economy across the past 8 years. It's just that this administration has failed in a very, very deep sense in terms of addressing the economic, the real deep economic concerns of the nation. More people have practically gone into poverty. More people have gone into unemployment. More people, have suffered, different levels of distress simply because you did not have an economy that is, you don't have an economy that is robust. And half of the challenge, yes, you can point to Ukraine war, you can point to COVID, but hey, other nations are grappling and have grappled with those issues, and they are getting better outcomes. So what it means is that you have had a poverty of economic management, and by the time you keep throwing palliatives, you are going to come up to a point where you are going to start asking yourself, are you going to put 180 million Nigerians in the palliative basket? Can you pay for it? Where are you going to find the funding for it? So it's cheaper and better to have worked on an economic model. And there are so many things, time forbids us, but we can talk about 200 things that could have been done within the past 8 years that were not done. The road not taken is what has expanded our crisis.
All right, let's look at this bit about the environment. Oil spill, just above the nameplate of New Telegraph. Oil spill. Nigerians lose against Shell at UK Supreme Court. Now, that story continues on page 2. This matter about oil spills and indeed the environment has continued to generate concerns. I mean, there are a lot of court cases that have not even been resolved within Nigeria and beyond the shores of Nigeria. But in this particular one, where they say Nigerians lose against Shell at the UK Supreme Court, and if you look through, it says something about the filing was done outside of the time frame. Now, what do you have to say about these issues around oil, black gold, as they say, and the fact that it affects our environment and the benefits to the people?
Yeah, oil is, in my view, still playing a far too much disproportionate role in our, economic discussions. Oil is a reclining, source of revenue and wealth for nations. Yes, in the short term, we are still making money from oil, but we know, for example, the Norwegians, some data I saw in the course of the week says of the new cars that were purchased in Norway within the past 1 year, 2 years in that sense, 80% of them were electric. Now that speaks to you that if I buy an electric car, I would not fuel it, I will not use fossil fuels for it. So we've got to deal with those issues in a fundamental sense. Then when you come to the issues of spills, it's actually it's a question of economic justice, it's a question of social justice, it's a question of human rights considerations. What do we think of our people? Because we spill oil because the sanctions and the regulatory regime still permits some degree of laxity, in terms of the performance of the oil prospecting companies. If you tighten the noose, there will be better considerations for the environment. And I think until we get out of the oil age, the thing to do is to strengthen and tighten the noose, in that sense. Once upon a time, people were smoking at every point, and then a Nigerian government, I think it was Oyikoye and Samkuti, who came and said, no, let's work on the fact that people cannot smoke in public places, and the legislation came up. So if you tighten the noose from a regulatory framework, you would address a whole lot of these issues and avoid some of the community disputations, court cases, and all that. Yes, the oil majors may have gotten away on a technical ground, but I think there may be a return match even in this matter.
But I guess, we have to see, because it's not always about starting it, it's about sustaining it. How effective is that smoking law, for instance, that you just mentioned? But hey, the Leadership newspaper is next this morning, and look at what you have on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. 10th National Assembly leadership, Tinubu in secret talks with opposition members elect. Don't expect us to be loyal if zoning formula stands. That's ascribed to Gagday. Expect repeat of 2015, Wasebetara warned. I won't quit race for Senate President. Izunaso vows. Allow transparent process, says Joel Onowakbo. All of that packed on the front page of the Leadership newspaper. We've had quite a lot said about that. Right under the nameplate, 77 trillion naira debts. IMF warns Nigeria against more foreign loans. A lot has been said about that as well. Last one, among others, on the front page, you can't find broadcast stations. Court tells NBC. Oh, it's been a long one. What do you make of that?
Great. The truth about it is that the NBC has overreached itself in terms of the regulatory interventions when it comes to the broadcast media space. It is, you know, when people get into government, there are two things about government. You know, government is an enforcer of law, right? But government is first a builder of ecosystems. Now, when you put the enforcement of law over building the ecosystem, you have a problem. Because why, for example, we're having a live, show, as it were, and so people make comments in the course of a live show. Are you going to put an handkerchief over their mouth, as it were? Now, when people make comments, what happens is that those comments are disputed. And if it is fairly disputed, that should be the end of the matter. If you want to push any other buttons, you go push them somewhere else. You don't punish the media organizations for doing what exactly is their brief. And remember that the media has constitutional provision, in fact, a constitutional mandate. If the media is not addressing issues, if the media is not debating issues, the media has made itself irrelevant. In fact, the media should be sued for being irrelevant.
For not doing
its job as assigned by the Constitution.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, just to build up a little bit on that,
well, that's the Leadership newspaper.
That's the Leadership newspaper, yeah. But still on that story, as broadcast journalists, we should weigh in on it. I wonder if you're also following the debate over the sale of the 600 megahertz spectrum broadband, for which we're now wondering, what should the role of the NBC be, if it truly is the National Broadcasting Corporation in that regard? Should it be checking the sale of the 600 megahertz broadband spectrum, or should it stand back, or should it align with the NCC?
Yeah, no, I think you have had these interagency, issues, particularly when it comes to juicy transactions, as it were. So I think you will still have some of that. I think that what to do is to look into the remit, of the laws as have been spelled out for both agencies, right? So that we can now say, okay, categorically, these are the issues. But I think the other part of it is that all these agencies operate within a broader government framework. They are supervising ministries in that sense, and as it were. And so when you find agencies coming out, whether they are security agencies or whether they are media regulating agencies, in that sense, or even education sector agencies coming to dispute in public, it also says to me that there is not enough of inter-agency coordination within the supervising systems.
Yeah, all right. Let's take a look very quickly at this Nigerian newspaper now. 18 days to exit, Buhari asks for $800 million World Bank loan. There are other interesting stories there. There's still a follow-up on the National Assembly elections debate, which is captured at the bottom of this Nigeria. Akeredolu faults APC zoning formula for 10th National Assembly. There's also this one at the right-hand corner. Senate indicts AGF NAFDAC 45 MDAs for financial infractions. That's a page 5 read. There are quite a number of other stories on the front page of this Nigeria, but I think we're totally out of time on the conversation for the review.
And consequently, we have to thank you, Richard Mammah, Managing Director, Editor-in-Chief, The Difference, as well as former editor, Business Hallmark. Thank you so much for your time this morning. Truly appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Well, we get into the issues right after now. Please stay with us.